College football is in transition, but what exactly is it transitioning into? That's the question asked by tons of college football purists. The beloved sport is evolving into something uncontrollable, but it's come way too far to turn back now. The strongest conferences are getting stronger, while the smaller guys are being left behind. The players are finally getting a share of the pie, but eat too much and you know what can happen. And at the same time that college football is dealing with the NIL boom, massive conference realignment is taking place, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving their traditional conference in the Big 12 and instead dipping out for the powerhouse SEC. And on top of that, you got USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12 for the Big 10. Some fear that college football is becoming quote-unquote NFL Junior. They think it'll end up being filled with only 32 viable teams, all jam-packed into 2 super conferences. And you can easily see why traditional college football fans would be upset with this. It could reduce the other conferences to the point of being completely obsolete. But a casual fan might look at it and go, but there was only a few teams that had an opportunity to win a national championship anyway. This might actually put more teams into the mix, not less. But the downside to this is that smaller programs who have rich traditions could end up fading away completely. What happens to their fans? It's been pretty fun reading about this over the last week because it's just really going down in this sport right now. It's possible that college football fans are overreacting a little, but at the same time, it does feel like a brand new dawn in that sport, and this arms race for power is already in full tilt. Programs are trying to keep the money coming in, and players are trying to get theirs for the very first time. And it's intriguing because they've managed to put the college football black market on Front Street, just out in the open for everybody to see. No doubt, it's a wild time in college football, and I honestly empathize and kind of feel bad for a lot of traditional college football fans, because the sport that they've given their blood, sweat, tears, and money to is being drastically altered and will never be the same as it was before. And if you got any type of heart, you have to imagine that for them, yo, that really sucks. But at the same time, I have to admit that for me, somebody who's not a traditional college football fan, this is the most excited I've been for a college football season since I was doing that Rutgers series. If you're a traditional college football fan, understand, I mean no disrespect. Real quick, let me try to explain my position. I've told this story before, so I'll make it quick. I grew up on historically black college football, mostly the SWAC. Southern University, Alcorn State, Grambling, Battle of the Bands, all that stuff. Of course, today, everybody knows Jackson State, even on a national level, thanks to the amazing work that Dion is doing. But back in the day, I used to just see Jackson State as Alcorn's rival. That's my history. I eventually got into the NCAA football video games in college, and even though I was there at Southern University on a football scholarship, I probably spent more time on the virtual field than I did on the real one. Oddly enough, my video game education somehow turned into a job a few years later. It's like I basically majored in NCAA. But even though I took to the video game, I never got into real life college football the same way. There were so many teams and so many bowl games, but only one national champion. And please understand, once again, I mean no disrespect, but from an outsider's perspective, if you wasn't building towards a national championship, then for me, it just kind of all felt pointless. So today we're taking on an extremely broad topic. And while I might go much deeper on individual topics in the future, today I'm just gonna be laying out my general thoughts, feelings, and position when it comes to the current state of college football. But other than that, you already know what time it is, bros. Cue the Wayne.
Yeah, well, I'm no quitter, 'cause I'ma go get her.
Alright, before we jump in, a quick word from today's video sponsor, Factor. Factor can help make hitting your nutrition goals easier than ever. They do this by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals straight to your door. Their team of gourmet chefs create each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best throughout the entire day. So in the fall, I'm always super busy with video scripts, editing, podcast appearances, add in dad/husband responsibilities, all on top of trying to keep up with the NFL and college football season. It's a great time, but it's also a grind. Factor gives me easy access to quickly repair good tasting food during these busy days, with quality ingredients that gets me filled up and re-energized, ready to attack the day head on. With Factor, they cut out the need for an extensive meal prep, all while keeping you away from the expensive food ordering apps. You know, the ones when you look at what you spent at the end of the week and you be like, I gotta learn how to cook. With Factor, you don't need to learn how to cook, and meals come together in minutes. It's super convenient and even faster than ordering takeout. So head to go.factor75.com/FlemLo130 and use the code FlemLo130 to get $130 off across 6 boxes. Again, that's go.factor75.com/FlemLo130 and use the code FlemLo130 to get $130 off. Shout out to Factor once again for sponsoring the video. Without further ado, let's get it. So a while back I asked y'all, with all the NIL changes and conference realignment, do you find college football more or less interesting? We got 11,000 votes, so a solid sample size, and here's what y'all said. 21% said it was less interesting and that all of the new changes was ruining the sport. 27% said it was more interesting because the changes kind of spiced things up. But coming in with over half of the votes, the largest percentage of people were actually still on the fence, not sure how it would play out. These are people who acknowledge that, yeah, there's room for improvement from the old system, but I have no idea what this new system is actually gonna look like. And how could you? There's no roadmap, no direction. We just out here, bro. As you could probably guess, this is where I fall. I'm trepidatious but intrigued. All sports leagues change and evolve over time. Within just the last couple years, the NFL added an extra regular season game and 2 playoff teams. The NBA added a play-in tournament which takes place before the playoffs. It allows teams that would be right on the outside looking in to challenge the teams who barely got in for their spot. People hated it at first, but now it's something that fans look forward to. Even college football itself has gone through a bunch of changes since I was a kid. The BCS era was villainized because those computers knew what the human heart of a diehard fan just never could. It knew that your favorite team had 0 chance of winning. The college football playoff was supposed to improve things from the BCS, giving more schools an opportunity to get in. But for NFL fans like myself and many others, the fact that you needed a group of people to vote on who got into the playoff just kind of defeated the entire purpose of the playoff in the first place. And again, from an outsider's perspective, it was easy to look at that and think, these dudes want to make sure they have a certain amount of control over which teams make it into these marquee games. They're choosing control over an actual compelling experience, and that was something that some fans could never get into. But despite their best efforts, the NCAA has continued to lose power over the years. Some sports leagues have anticipated changes coming and gotten out in front of the oncoming issues by embracing small levels of change in super specific areas. That's all it took. But while other leagues have made minor adjustments and changes over time, there have been others who've refused to even do the bare minimum. But out of every major sport except maybe baseball, college football seems to be among the most resistant to change. In 1978, USC Hall of Fame coach John McKay was asked about the NCAA's decision to reduce the number of football scholarships from 105 to 95. So you're going from 105 scholarships to 95 scholarships, 10 less scholarships. Here's how this Hall of Fame college football coach responded. Mark this day on your calendar. This day is the ruin of college football. It will only go downhill from here. So when I say they're resistant to change, they're resistant to any kind of change, big or small. By the way, in the 40 years since that quote was recorded, college football has actually dropped the scholarships even lower, all while absolutely soaring in overall popularity. And when it comes to TV revenue, it's the 2nd biggest sport in the country. I think one of the reasons college football gets so nervous when it comes to change is because the sport was just built on an unsustainable model from the very beginning. Amateurism was the glue that held it all together, but seeing as how amateurism is kind of like this mystical force as opposed to like a logical concrete thing that could stand up in court, then essentially college football was on shaky legs from the very beginning. It's kind of crazy that they lasted this long under that old model. But now that the old amateurism model is out, it's been replaced with the new NIL craze. So basically, after decades and decades of college players making their schools and coaches rich while sometimes struggling to buy food, student athletes are now able to legally make money on endorsements, appearances, or they can even license their own name, image, and likeness to be included in a video game. How about that? It's overall dope, but the whole thing is extremely unstable right now. They lack any kind of direction, and they lack any form of like centralized leadership. So I was reading this article from The Ringer, and in it I found this quote from ESPN senior sports writer Pete Thamel echoing these same exact sentiments. Here's what he said. No one is in charge. For all the billions of dollars, millions of fans, and boundless passion that surround college football, that's always been its glaring and bizarre flaw. Nobody's looking out for the greater good of the game. Nobody's guiding the sport towards long-term prosperity and short-term sensibility. No one is building consensus and channeling all of the ratings, financial success, and popularity towards an outcome that is positive for everybody in the sport. The dopest thing about that quote is the fact that it's not a new quote. That's from 2011. So this ain't some dude panicking over NIL deals and conference realignment. This was a guy who was looking at college football. It's in the height of its popularity. Everything is going great. And he's like, bro, there's no leadership. You know what I'm saying? So the lack of leadership has always been an issue. It's just even more apparent now. The current college football setup has 17-year-old freshmen signing $1 million endorsement deals with essentially no regulations. I think we all wanted college football players to get paid. We knew then and know now that they deserve it. But I do worry a little bit about a few things with this. So a lot of kids are getting paid before they play a college game. It does create a little bit of pressure, especially on some of these larger deals. So that's just kind of an extra element that they're going to be having to deal with on top of, you know, the normal student athlete thing. But my bigger issue is like these crazy announcements. I really don't like shouting to the world that a kid just signed a $8 million deal. You know what I'm saying? Think about the pressure that pro athletes get put under once they get that first contract. I did a video, what happened to Trent Richardson, and in that video I go through it, you know, piece by piece, but essentially Trent's entire family depended on him for everything and kind of siphoning his cash, you know, stealing. That stuff ended up putting him in a really bad space, and it essentially ruined his career. So to think that that's like completely out of the question with these kids that's way younger, you know, it's just dumb. Like, of course that's gonna happen. For years and years, college football itself, hardcore and casual fans have all known the days of amateurism were clearly numbered, and that soon college players were gonna start to share in the revenue that they clearly were helping to generate. But college football ain't do nothing but cling to the past, flat out refusing to accept the reality despite the fact that they had to see it coming 10 million miles away. Now the White Walkers are here and nobody did a damn thing about it, so they're obviously underprepared. Now the college football world is falling into chaos. The old guard is lashing out in fear that they'll be played out of their position, but the new kingdoms are taking more territory, gaining powerful allies and executing deadly sneak attacks. College football has been allowed to just drift, and you know, we'll see where the whole thing lands. And it just so happened to land in the year 2022 where everything is so extreme. Like, it's either all or nothing. It's like, hey, student athlete, either starve and not be able to accept prize money on a game show, or make $5 million a minute before you ever play a snap in college football. Why is there no in between? I personally like the NIL. I like the ability for these cats to get their bread. And companies want to advertise. What do you think? I got a sponsorship in every video. But I just don't really think it's sustainable to be giving cats $8 million sponsorship deals before they drop their first video. You feel what I'm saying? Like, does that correlation, like, did that comparison make sense? I know the money is great, but I worry about the kid. I worry about the pressure that puts on him, on the field and off. I think about the potential bad contracts. I think about greedy family members and startup restaurants that never had a chance. Essentially, I think some type of regulations are smart and necessary if we want this thing to actually be able to keep going. But like I said before, even with no regulations, I still think NIL is the only fair way to run this. So overall, I think it's definitely good for college football. I just really wish the NCAA wouldn't have sat on their hands for the last decade and actually prepared for this so that we could have had a plan in place.
When you start paying athletes like they're professionals, you get athletes acting like they're professionals. And you don't have staffs large enough and equipped enough to handle a young man with money. Let me go deeper. Handle a young man that's making more money than some of the coaches on staff. you got a real problem.
Some fear that getting money so early could change the quality of dudes as far as maturity. This is a real concern, as the last thing any of us want is to create a bunch of spoiled, entitled brat types who get filthy rich before doing anything really, and then develop these attitudes like they just above everybody and kind of have that sense of entitlement. The NIL situation could create divisiveness in the locker room, but we've already seen quite a few times where it may actually have the opposite effect. I've seen some players insist that companies include their teammates in deals. Imagine being empowered enough at that young age to get your boy taken care of. Look, I can get my dog paid too. So while no matter what, some dudes are just gonna be scumbags, I think this whole NIL situation has empowered a lot of cats who was like natural born leaders and put them in a position to take care of other people or empower other people. With NIL, the business skills and everything that they picking up is probably a hell of a lot more valuable than that college scholarship education that everybody used to rave about all the time when they would say that athletes didn't need to be paid. NIL also solves the age-old issue of, well, how much money does the bowling team get? It's not fair if the football team gets all the bread. Well, it is fair because the money doesn't come from the school and doesn't need to be split and then distributed amongst all of the sports programs. The money comes from private businesses who create the market, and your value is whatever they're willing to pay. But with all of that said, my favorite thing about the NIL has been the way that talent seems to be spread into a wider range of schools. Now there's incentive for top prospects to not go to the same few schools we've been seeing for the past decade. Programs like USC and Texas have a real chance to get back into the elites of college football, making the future of college football look a lot more competitive, not less. This is why a lot of the main people complaining are those who have dominated in the old system, understandably. They know that now, quote unquote, buying players means that less of the top talent is gonna just fall into their lap and agree to wait 3 years to get on the field. NIL in this way actually helps level the playing field and has me much more excited to watch programs like Miami or Texas or even Notre Dame. All of these teams that college football has been trying to sell me on for years, talking about their tradition and how this might be the year they rise back to prominence. Well, now for the first time ever, I actually believe that that might be true. And while I know it's not all good, I think that part of it bodes really well for the college football product. This should make things a lot more interesting for fans like me who wants to invest in a team who hasn't won recently and maybe is not at the point where they can win a national championship right now, but now there's actual hope that within 2 to 3 to 4 years, they might be able to build themselves back up into a powerhouse and really start to compete at the top level. Alabama and Clemson and Georgia are cool, but you know, I would like to see some other schools as well. So how you feel about the current state of college football largely depends on which faction you've pledged your loyalty to. Are you in line with the new guard, or are you more in line with the old guard who wants things to go back to how they were? But I made this video because maybe you're like me. Like, maybe I'm not alone in this. Maybe you're an outsider who's intrigued. A person who's kind of enjoying the chaos, but also hoping that when the dust settles, it reveals something new. Something that can bring in new fans and hopefully not completely ruin it for the old fans. Going into this season, college football seems a lot more wide open than it has in a long time. It feels like the teams have been reset and will once again have to jockey for position if they want to sustain dominance, not just for the next few years, but for the foreseeable future. And I gotta say that for me, that seems pretty damn fun. It sounds like a movie I don't already know the ending to, as a few of the big bads seem more vulnerable than ever. Can they scratch and claw and maintain their position of dominance? Or will some other program reclaim their former glory and now take their rightful place on the Iron Throne for a while? At the same time, I acknowledge that in the long run, it is definitely possible that this could lead to a worse product than before. It could lead to new problems for college athletes that some may struggle to deal with. It's a dangerous time for college football, but also an exciting one. I don't know what we'll find on the other side of this little raggedy bridge, but in this particular case, I find the journey itself to be a hell of a lot more interesting than not moving at all. Peace.